I'm starting this lesson by showing you what I hope to create, and this is it. This is the finished version, which I think works really well. This is just the low-res preview, by the way, as you're working. When you actually export and render something, it will fill in all the details. So don't panic if your artwork looks a little low resolution as you're working in this preview view. We'll come to rendering it later. So how do we go about positioning our different labels that we created earlier and exported as PNGs onto our object to achieve this? Well, let's go back to our starting point here that we'd reached from the end of the previous lesson. So we have the materials and finishes set, and we now want to place the graphics on the objects. So to do that, in much the same way as we change the materials, double click the portion of these objects you want to work with. So I've just selected the glass of my votive here. And under actions, you want to look for this icon, place graphic on model. Click that and navigate to the location you've exported your various labels. And I'm going to use the label that has a filled gold background and the details reduced from it in black. So let's open that, and you'll see that appears, and you can click to drag and reposition that on the surface of the object. Now I'm going to move my camera so I'm in a better position to see this. Now you'll notice there's control handles around the edge of this, and I'm going to use those to click, drag while holding shift to reduce the size to something I'm happier with, I think about there. And that's looking good. I think that's the effect that I'm going for the votive. And then for the box itself, again, I'll double click and we'll click on the place graphic on model action. And of course your artwork may be different, so you don't have to recreate this exactly as I am. You're free to experiment and see what works. So I'm going to use this version here, and you'll notice this time when I place it, it's badly warped out of proportion, and that's because we had made some changes to the dimensions of the original object. So to kind of alleviate that, I'm just going to click and drag this control handle, this time without holding shift, and I'll keep going until the overall shape surrounding the control handles is as close to a perfect circle as I can get it. And unfortunately there's no way to kind of set the default scale here. You have to eyeball it. Now these are only intended as conceptual mockups anyway, but it is annoying. I hope it's something Dimension will update in future. So I'm going to scale this proportionately now, and we'll go to about that size there. And again, just eyeballing it, I want to position that centered on that face of a box. And you can see peeking away there's a few versions I've created earlier that I'm going to run through with you to give you some ideas. So those are the front faces, and you may be wondering, how do I add another layer onto the same object? So again, we'll double click, and these here effectively work as layers. So when I click under actions to add another graphic, and this time I think I'll use, let's use the brand story. You can see that appears above the other graphic. You can drag and drop to change the layering. For this it shouldn't matter because they're the same color and they're transparent. So I'm going to drag this until it forms a circle. I'll position this on the correct face, and I could leave it like that, but because I've got these floral elements and there's a bit of a sharp edge to those, I actually want to position this so that those flowers, they sit perfectly in the corner of the object. So this is going to take a little bit of nuancing, but I think the effect will be worth it. And unfortunately you can only scale from the center, so you have to keep dragging and making little micro adjustments. But there we are, without too much trouble. That's it. That's the effect we're looking for. And when we come to render, of course, all this will show up nice and sharply. So that's our story that I've positioned on the right side face there. And we'll just turn to the back and we're going to put ingredients on the back here. So when you place artwork, it will tend to place it relative to the position your camera is facing. So I've rotated around to the back. I'll double click to make sure I've got this portion of the object selected. And it doesn't really matter what you have selected in the layers palette here. You just click place graphic on model, and this time we'll add the ingredients on the back. I'll again drag the control handle to make this form a circle. And I suppose really we should have this match the kind of size of our border that we have on the next face here. So let's do that. May just have to fine tune it and try to make those look nice and consistent. It may just be a concept, but details like this I think make the difference between it feeling professional and looking a bit amateurish. Once you deselect, you can double click to select again, or you can go into the folder and then select the graphic you want regardless of where you're facing. You could rename these as well to help yourself if you wanted. Just double click and you can type in a new name. Just going to nudge that ever so slightly, and there we go. I'm happy with the way that looks. So that's quite simple, but I think really stunning. And I'll show you a few other examples. So yes, that's what we set out to achieve. Interestingly, I used the white version of our story there. And of course, you may be wondering, what about the backgrounds that we have prepared? And in these samples here, I have dragged in background layers, and this version I particularly like. I think this looks really stunning. It's got this subtle kind of hand-drawn orchid pattern. And I'll show you how to position this because it's a little different to the other graphics. So if I move back across to my version here, which doesn't have a background graphic, I'm going to double click to select the top part of a box. Use the same method as before to add a graphic. This time I'll navigate to my background elements and select the graphic I'm looking for. And again, we'll just turn this to a circle so that it's not being warped. Now at first this looks like a mess, and I think that's due to the opacity being too high. So under properties, as soon as we bring the opacity down to around 40, now there's a sense of perspective, and the background isn't battling for attention with the other elements. So I'm going to drag that down to be the bottom layer, just above our finish, of course. And you've got a choice of either I could stretch and position this either so it just sits on this one face. If I stretched it further, you'll notice it will actually automatically start to reach around the other faces of the object, but it tends to warp a little. And so the preferred method, if I shrink this back, is under placement, instead of decal, to use fill. And I've then got to do my scaling again, and you'll notice it's set to repeat. So as I scale this down, it will simply repeat the same pattern as many times as needed to cover every surface of a box, which is really useful. So I'm simply going to scale. Let's hold shift to make it proportionate. And I'm just going to scale this until I'm happy with the way it looks. If it's scaled somewhere like there, I think the detail is fighting a little bit with my logo. So just want to scale it. Something like that could be quite cool. But I think I settled at something around there. And if we look at the version, I spent quite a bit of time playing with that until I was happy. I really like this version here. You can see I'd lowered the opacity even further. On this one, the opacity is just 19. So it's a very subtle effect indeed. Now this looks quite nice to have some contrast between the base of a box being plain black and then having that pattern just on the top. But if you wanted that pattern on the bottom as well, unfortunately the eyedropper tool can't copy graphics you've placed. So we're going to double click to select the base, add a new layer and select our pattern, and we'll just repeat the same process we'll go to Fill, it's set to repeat, we'll lower the opacity, I'll work with it at 40% just so you can see this on the video, and then again I'm just going to move the control handle so that our scaling isn't warped. And if you wanted, you could drag and you could try to position this and scale this so that it matches up perfectly with the pattern above. I actually found, just arrived at a size where you kind of get the impression of that pattern flowing across both portions of the box. And that works, I think, really nicely. So let's just zoom across. Here's the other version I created earlier. And let's show you some of the other examples that can be created using the elements I picked out. So here for the votive itself, we've got a far more minimal logo. So it kind of contrasts a little with the box has that key line around it. This, we've just got the plain text, so that looks quite nice. And here we have a very subtle background, some black roses, and the bottom portion of a box contrasts that. This time we've also taken the attention away from our little ribbon, and the ribbon is a subtle black. So that was another option. This option here will look just at the box this time. This is kind of a abstract, almost Art Deco pattern that we've used, quite a loud background. Then we've tried to place the label for the front on a gold sticker, so that creates quite a different impression. Maybe that's for you, maybe it's not. Then we have this version here. So again, maybe this is to your taste. Maybe you quite like to use imagery to kind of sell a concept. I prefer it a little more minimal, but this is an effect you could achieve. And because we've got the layering and the transparency, it shows what you're able to do in Dimension. You could have a logo actually overlapping and interacting with a background image behind. Another option, this time I've monotoned just a simple image of an orchid, and that's been placed behind the logo there. So it bleeds around the corners a little, which just shows off the fact that we're able to print directly onto the entire surface of a box, not just stick a label on. So hopefully looking at some of those options give you some ideas of what it's possible to create. But of course, please dive into this, and using these techniques, see what you're able to create yourself using your own labels, your own logo, and your own artwork. Once you're happy with the way your model's looking, you're ready for the next lesson, where we look at setting the scene surrounding our objects, playing with the lighting, and really getting this ready to render in high res.